Realty, which was good exposure outside of just the Greater Heights area. I mean, now people from Memorial and Sunnyside and the East Side are having more awareness of our knowledge of those areas. We're always going to be well entrenched into the Heights areas, so I think we have to do a continually recognized job of being knowledgeable in Grays Heights and in Springs and in Cypress, where we do perform a fair number of transactions on a regular basis. I mean, we always have a transaction every month in Cypress or the Woodlands or Spring. And we always have a transaction in Spring Branch. We always have a transaction on the east side every month. And I don't think people recognize that. While we do about 45% of our business in the Heights, we do 55% of our business outside of the Heights, and I don't think people recognize that. But we're going to continue to work on that in 2017 as well. So we're going to start just with this Supra Exchange, which promises to be just a little complicated citywide. Recognize everyone at HAR in a multi-county area is going to go through this experience, and so it's kind of timed by the day. The week is what now?
November 16th.
Yeah, so that whole week, which is like November 14th through the 20th, everyone in the city is going to experience this. So Martha Turner is going to take 1,000 Supras off of their houses and go to the George R. Brown, exchange their Supras and get them and put them back in a car and transport them back to the 1,000 listings. John Daugherty has to do the same thing. Better Homes and Garden has to do the same thing. So if I were you and you have people flying in from Japan to come look at houses that week, I plan in advance. It's going to be complicated, okay? Let's be clear, it's going to be complicated. A number of those listings will probably just go on temporarily no showings, right? They have to take the Supra off, they have to bring it in from Martha Turner, they have to put it in the truck, they have to carry it over there. They're not doing that in 4 hours, folks. They're going to do it over an extended period of time. Marianne's going to kind of explain how it's going to be for us, which is the same thing. I'm a realist. If our exchange date is Wednesday, most people are going to remove the keys on Sunday, right? You're not going to go over there Monday morning and take the Supra off. It's too damn stressful. We don't meet our deadline. There is a consequence for us not getting those Supras in. So we're going to start collecting the Supras on about Saturday or Sunday, make a continual rush on Monday and Tuesday, and have them all here on Tuesday, which means you got to show it on Wednesday. There's no Supra there. We don't have a great solution other than bring your keys here, label your keys very well. People can come and pick up the keys on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and by Thursday, we hope to have the Supras back onto the houses, or we'll hire additional help to get them back on. It's the removal that's harder than it is, because we don't really know what half those Supras are. But, we need the plan. The plan is remove the Supras, bring the keys here, label the keys, figure out from your seller, explain to your seller in advance. The city is having a citywide Supra Exchange, and it's going to be complicated, and just get a plan, and then be sure to communicate to Marianne and Selena and the group or the appointment manager how that's going to work. I'll let you reiterate how it's going to work exactly.
Don't really cover it, but I would recommend if you have any Supras in your garage or your car or on a listing that's out of auction and really you're just waiting to close, go ahead and bring those boxes back. It's going to be a lot easier to have them in office sooner than later. If all you need is a key for the buyer's walkthrough, bring it back as soon as possible, because not all of the Supras are in Bill's name, and they have to be in Bill's name in order to exchange them one for one, so then I have to do a transfer beforehand. So it's not just that day of, it's leading up to that. We just need a really good count on all of our Supras.
Aaron.
To have them in the office by Monday, so that we can make sure that we have everything transferred that needs to be, and we'll do, like Bill said, either temporarily no showings, or they can come get the key, or it has to be accompanied. Everyone's going to be doing this in Houston. No one's going to be upset because it's not going to be a surprise. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have your own personal Supra, I cannot exchange it for you. You have to make your own appointment to do that. But I can tell you how to do that. Most of the Supras in our office are registered to Bill, so you don't have to worry about it. I just know a couple people have their own personal ones, and we can discuss that. Are there any questions?
Where would the
You're going to change the Supra keys?
You have to do your own personal key. I can't do it for you.
So how do we?
So Aaron, can we email those guys at Mar and see if they can come next Tuesday for a demonstration, or I can pick one up and do the demonstration of the new boxes and how the new key works. And
Sure.
we will explain this all to you. We'll explain the super key and the fob going away next Tuesday. That'll be a perfect deal. We just want to alert you in advance. I mean, we're telling you stuff, a month in advance and 3 weeks in advance and 1 week in advance about the Supra Exchange.
You should go ahead and tell your clients.
Yeah, we just tell my clients, especially.
If you're looking to list mid-November, you wanna prepare them, but it's not gonna be your typical.
We have some combo boxes. We don't have a lot of combo boxes, but we have some. We probably consolidate a few more, whatever. It's $30 or $40 to go buy a combo box to use for a few hours. But I think some sellers might just want to open the door and go for a walk that particular day. We might hide a key under a mat. There's any kind of ways that I think one can get around it. If it's a vacant house, I think it's probably going to be the easiest. It's the occupied houses that will be a little more complicated. So
we're even changing out the little super key.
Oh, yeah.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
Whole new system.
key
Whole new
and-
system.
And that includes if you have a fob or
The fob will go away.
the fob.
Yeah.
will-
And it'll just link to the smart phone.
That's right.
Is the super gonna change?
The
at
Supra
all?
is slightly larger. It has this Bluetooth technology. It is slightly bulkier. It's like, we think it's better. We had a study. They had a demonstration for the MLS Advisory Committee. See, they've been practicing in other cities. It's not like this Houston's the first prototype. They did it and they rolled it out in the Bryan College Station of the world, and then Austin, and then, about 85% of the nation already has this new Supra. They've been using it, worked out the kinks. Houston being one of the largest MLSs, it is the single largest MLS of one particular MLS. They just wanted to wait a little bit and work out the kinks.
So if they have, like an automatic gate key,
Mhm.
is it big enough for the gate key?
It's not that much bigger. It's probably 20% larger. When we were putting in the 3 keys on the ring and it was getting stuck in there and you're having to slam the Supra to get the bottom out.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest difference. It is heavier. It is a heavier box. The battery is going to work significantly better, but it's a heavier box.
One.
Questions about that? Very good. Okay. We have kind of been working on some training ideas, and we have people that have been submitting these questions either to Rhonda or to Aaron or to marketing or to sales or whatever. So I thought today we would just kind of go over some of these questions that we had and try and answer some of these questions to the group. And of course, ample opportunity for you to ask additional questions. So these are in no order particularly, and I'm not even going to mention the name of who had the question unless that person wants to bring it up or whatever. So I'm gonna go during that path. Are you gonna pull them up for me or am I gonna read them? Okay, so we've had people ask, and I'm just randomly going through here. Star has this issue today, I don't think she knows anything, about holding back money from a seller. It's new construction, we're going to closing, we're under stress, and there's $5,000 worth of things not done, and we need to close today. Couple of points I want to make about this. I don't know how to make it clear to you. And if you're not making it clear to the buyers and the sellers, you're being irresponsible. Closing dates are fluctuating all the time. And if you're not planning for the dates to move, you are creating undue stress as the realtor. You're giving bad advice, you're giving bad gardening advice, you're giving bad medical advice, you're the licensed realtor. There's no way on hell someone can tell me that if November 8th is the close date, that's gonna happen on November 8th. Too many things happen. Title companies delay it, mortgage companies delay it, underwriters delay it, buyers delay it, sellers delay it, City of Houston delays it, anyone can delay it. So it's a target.
It's a moving target.
The people that think it's going to close on November 8th and move the utilities and schedule their mover and have moved out of their house and think that the likelihood that that's going to happen, you need to plan on an alternative close date, okay? You must not create this much stress. People need to get into the habit, post 2008 and Dodd-Frank, that if it's the 8th, do not plan on closing and moving in that day. It doesn't usually work that way anymore. You need to plan on, that needs to be a Wednesday, knowing that it could probably move to Thursday or Friday. You need to plan your move for Saturday, and everyone just needs to pay 3 extra days of rent wherever they're at over there in their mortgage house. It's too complicated. Too many times people are having to move their stuff to storage, go stay at the Four Seasons, put in the utilities, undo the utilities, put back the utilities in what was already a very contentious time, a very stressful time. We already had to argue over the price, we had to argue over the repairs, we had to argue over the appraisal, we're gonna argue over the walkthrough one more time also. Come on, guys, too stressful. Needs to be another plan, needs to be some flexibility. And listen, you're not hearing one thing I say today, there's not a builder on earth that's not delayed, okay? They've been delayed this year, they were delayed last year, they were delayed in 2008, and 2001, and 97. Builders are never finished on time, okay? They're unrealistic. They want to cut their costs, and they're not going to be 100% finished on the day of closing. It's just rare. And I know I'm speaking kind of to the extreme, but it's just rare that they would ever make the first or the second or the third date that they really tell you that they're going to make. They live in denial, okay? And we must live in reality. And that close date, we're closing all the time things that were set to close last April, and then it was May, and then it was July, and then it was August, and then it was September. You know how many delays we've had on those rolling right things? 2.5 years. You know, things get delayed all the time through no fault of anyone in particular. Unrealistic expectations probably is the foremost deal. And then putting undue stress and assuming that something's going to happen. We mentioned it before. There's this expectation if I'm pouring a driveway and I schedule the concrete guy 2 weeks in advance, and it's all scheduled up there, and I form it up, and I get my permit, and I have my inspection, I'm ready for the concrete, and it rains that day, the concrete is not going to be done the next day. It's going to be 2 weeks when they come back to deliver that concrete. Now, you would think, okay, it rains today, you're going to do the concrete off. He was already booked from 2 weeks in advance for the next day, okay? So there's this unrealistic expectation when we miss a deadline that it's gonna be moved over one day. It isn't gonna be moved over one day. You know, and construction is like that. The floor guy, when he couldn't go because the trim department wasn't ready, already had another job or 9 the next day, and so he's not coming the next day. Yes?
So you're saying there is no way to hold back?
No, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there how it works. I'm not gonna listen to the lender. We're gonna talk about how it works. But I want you to be prepared for delays. So be prepared for delays was issue number 1. Number 2 is that if you don't trust that the builder's gonna finish small details, then you're going to live in holy hell for the next year or 2, because that's the same guy that's going to have to warranty or come over there. When you move in, I assure you, the release for the washing machine, where the water drain, when you hook up the washing machine and you go put the drain line in, that shit's full of a bunch of debris, right? You're going to need the builder to come over and fix that. The cable wires are not going to work properly when you call AT&T or Comcast or Southwestern Bell. You're going to need the builder for that. First time you go and do the dishwasher, it isn't going to work right. You have to have a relationship with these builders that they're going to come over here and show you. Your guy's going to go into the attic and he's going to turn off the switch. It's going to turn off the water heater, and you're not going to realize the water heater was on a switch. And you're going to call the builder. If you've been an asshole the whole time, you've got a long time of dealing with this same builder. So at some point, you need to build some relationship and expect that, yeah, he's going to have to come touch up the floor, he's going to have to touch up the paint, he's going to have to fix a little electrical, he's going to have to fix a little plumbing, he's going to have to adjust something, he's got to do some warranty work along the way. So you've got to have some relationship with them, or your person, not only are we talking about this last little detail, you're talking about a lot more details, or they just shouldn't buy new construction. You just need to, and if they bought the existing house on the resale market, there was no warranty, they'd have to figure that shit out on their own. But I mean, they get the chance to figure it out in new construction with someone who understands the house. So it's relationship building. I would do what I could as the professional to set a reasonable expectation and deal with it. When it comes to holding back repairs, it's possible. The lender does not want to loan money on a house that's not finished, You don't want to promise that the pool's done and then the pool's not done and we're going to hold $5,000. So the lender doesn't want to know. They want to wait. Okay? So when you send some amendment somewhere that talks about holding money for repairs, you're going to flag the lender, and the lender's going to say, no, I'm not loaning $1 million on a house that's not finished yet, because I don't want to foreclose on a house that's not finished yet. So it's like I said, automatically it's going to flag them. So how do we get around that? This is the way I get around it. The seller can pay anyone that they want with their proceeds. I don't know if they're paying off an ex-lover, gambling debt from Las Vegas. If they did a repair, they're going to pay the roofer at closing. Maybe they prepped the paint and they agreed to pay the painter at closing. They can pay off their Target card. They can pay off their Neiman Marcus card. It's their proceeds. They're making money and they can pay their proceeds wherever it is that they want. So the ease, and the lender can't tell them they can't pay that. The title company can't tell them they can't pay that. I can direct the title company, if I'm selling my house, to pay anyone I want. I want to pay off my ex-lover, pay him from these proceeds. I can pay to the IRS. I can pay to Visa if I want to. It's my money. So the easiest way to do is have direct the seller to notify the title company to issue a check for $3,000 to somebody, usually not the buyer. It's usually back to the seller. The seller's making $100,000. We're going to hold $3,000 of the seller's proceeds and create a check for $3,000 paid to the seller, John Smith. You're going to hand that check at closing over to the buyer. When title companies doesn't care about this, and then you go and the guy does the work and you hand him his check for $3,000 and he got the rest of his money. It's perfectly legal. It's perfectly acceptable. It works all the time that way. If someone doesn't like that idea, another way around it is to offer, we've done it many times, is that Boulevard Realty will hold the money. I am an escrow, in the eyes of Texas, I'm a licensed broker that has a fiduciary responsibility to be fair to all parties. So I can take the check made out to the seller, I can hold it over here in my safe, and when the work is mutually agreed upon, the buyer sells a release and the seller signs a release, I pay that money over to the seller again. It's their money, okay? Mm-hmm.
So there's no form, this is just done on an email?
Just done in an amendment, whatever, or through a notification. You create an amendment just for the seller. You're not going to give it to the lender. The seller agrees to authorize the title company to cut a check for $3,000 to the seller out of the seller's proceeds to be held by Boulevard Realty until all repairs are repaired for 30 days. And we would have to help you probably with the first go round of how we've done this. We have done it hundreds of times, okay? Works just fine. Now, same thing. We're to this house and it's whatever it costs, let's pretend it's, now, if there's significant work over here, we're talking about $50,000 worth of work, we ain't going to closing. We're not going to go on that. We're talking about the final coat of floors for the tile guy to come back and put in a threshold, and there's usually a list of 10 little bitty things that we're waiting on someone cleaning some debris under the house. I'm a realist. They're not always going to finish that work. Buyer's not going to be totally satisfied, and seller's never going to be totally satisfied, and we'll have to step in. Frank and our team are going to have to go over there and hire someone to clean the debris under a house every now and then in order to get everybody happy. Don't think that I don't have to do it for Melissa's builders and my builders and everyone's builders. I mean, it gets frustrating at some point. But before I let your buyer not buy a house or have to move 4 times or have to go to temporary quarters, I just feel like this is probably in everyone's best interest. I would like to be involved earlier than later. The day of closing, it's a little harder. The day of closing, people are just pissed off. They got pissed off along the way, see? And I have people are not reasonable. They're not reasonable. They will not buy a $1.3 million house over $300 for some reason. It's the way people are. They draw a line of it. It wasn't the $300. It wasn't the final window cleaning. It was the process. It was, I'm paying too much to begin with. I've been delayed. I had to pay for a lock extension twice. They're mad. They're mad by the time they get there, and reason is no longer held there. So you don't want to escrow the money. I mean, the title company's not going to agree to hold any money anymore. It's just rare that would happen. But there are ways around it. There are other escrow ways that it can be done. At some point, if you don't trust, if the buyer doesn't trust that the seller's ever gonna do that, we probably need to know that. Holding any money isn't gonna get anything, because the money just kind of sits here until all the parties are in agreement. I can't just go, the buyer is unhappy and the seller says it's done. This happens all the time. Seller thinks he's finished. Buyer had a list of 10 items. Builder fixes the 10 items. It's the 10 new items that they discovered when they moved in, right? That's what they get upset about. It's not those first 10, it's the next 10. And they want to keep the money because they want to apply the pressure to the builder. The only way to really run that was to have never closed. I mean, you just don't close until you're perfectly satisfied, and be prepared for whatever the consequence of that is. You already sold your house, the consequence, go live. The Four Seasons will rent you something for a month. Astro Inn will rent to you by the week. There's all kinds of, I had John's over there living at the Astro Inn for a weekly rate of $281 a week. So, I mean, I know what it costs. I'm staying at the Four Seasons while I'm remodeling my house. You're gonna have to go somewhere, put your stuff in storage, move it once, pay for the storage unit, go somewhere, turn off the utilities, move it back, all those things. What's that cost? $10,000 in each of these instances, and we're fighting over usually cleaning debris under the house or something really nominal along the way. That's not the only way to do it. Sometimes if it's the final coat of the floors, you're not moving in anyway, but you could have the builder prepare the check for the floor guy and the buyer, the realtor, the check, when the floors are done, you pay the floor guy. It's getting people to do the work. It's not that the builder's not competent. You can't get the people work. The smaller the builder are, the less pull they have of getting people there. And you don't know how many times the typical painter, I'm just making this up, gives a bid. There were 4 bids, he chooses the low bid, right? The low bid guy comes in, quality work wasn't real good. You go to your walkthrough, the buyer puts out 4,000 pieces of blue tape. The builder gets back with the painter, and the painter says, okay, I want $5,000 more for this. We didn't quote a level 5 sheetrock job, but we didn't quote that being done that way. And so then the builder's paying $5,000 or can't agree, gets in a fight with this painter, and it's got to go hire a whole other painter over here who has to go fix painter B. And oftentimes there's painter C before we get to the very end. And it's all about money. When you get down to it, everything can be solved with money. You'd be surprised. But it's not cost effective to repaint the house when you've already paid one painter to pay it. So what incentive does the painter, who's been paid 95%, who painted the house and it was perfectly beautiful, it sat there for a year. Now we're going to sell the new construction that's sitting there a year, and you got all sorts of cracking, normal wear and tear that was cracking, people walking through it, and it's hard as hell to get that guy to come back and do all the punch list. The buyer today, who's very demanding, who's already nervous about paying top dollar for a house, wants to pay. You've got conflict. It's normal conflict. You can see how it happens. But there are ways around the escrow. You don't want to tell the title company you're going to escrow money. You do not want to tell the lender that you're going to escrow money. You're not really escrowing money. You're directing proceeds from the seller that were his money to be redirected some way. Just like he paid the roofer, hired a roofer and going to pay the roofer closings. Done the same way. We cover that one? We might get too complicated there. Okay. Appraisal came in short. What are we going to do about that sort of thing? So here's a class example. My Devon, $2.4 million, got under contract. I know, I'm a pretty smart guy. They were like 6 comparables of a brand new house for $2.4 million in Acton Oaks. There's one that's 1.7 and there's one that's 3.5. That ain't anywhere close to 2.4, okay? So, and that 2 is not 6. So when they go to do the comps for my house on Acton Oaks, they brand new, state-of-the-art, beautiful, 14-foot ceiling, Chateau Domaine windows, plaster walls, amazing countertops, plumbing fixtures, and Saks tile. They go and use a 2001 Mediterranean McMansion box thing that no one would remotely think is comparable to Devon, right? But they have to use something. They're stretching. So they use this 2001 house, they use a 2008 house, and they use basically a tract home. I'm at $400 $150 a foot, and everything else over there, those things are at $325 a foot. We're all pretty significant. And the fact is, there's just not enough comps. Okay? If I were to sell my house, there are no comps for my house. It doesn't exist. Okay? You're never going to get, it's never going to appraise. It's never going to appraise because there would never be 6 things like it or whatever. So you need to be prepared for how the comps. And I will just be, I will try and explain it the best way I can. I am not a big fan of our appraisal system. Never have been a big fan. Because I think it's the same thing. If you make $80,000 2 years ago, $90,000 this year, $100,000 this year, and you average the 3 years and say, I'm going to give you your performance review. We're going to go average these 3 years. You know what you're going to do? You're going to make less the next year than you made this year. No way you can make more, right? Never takes into account appreciation. So you're screwing the seller when things are on an upswing. Okay, you're screwing the seller, right? Because there's just no way you can equate for an increase. But at the same time, let's pretend the market's falling and we represent the buyer. And one house sold for 100, and another one sold for 90, and another one sold for 80. Why would we want to average and pay 90 when the going market rate's at 80? You're screwing the buyer. He's overpaying based on comps, right? Because the market, I don't think you should pay attention to that. I'm not the federal government. I understand what they're trying to do is use the least possible common denominator. But you've got to explain it to the buyer side how appraisals really work. It works great if you're in a master plan community and there are 6 of the exact same houses. Plan 3301 from David Weekley in section 12 of Cinco Ranch. It's pretty easy to figure out what people are willing to pay for that. It's not so easy and not a master plan community. And it does not necessarily protect the buyers or the sellers. It's an idea. The mortgage company only cares about the mortgage company. They don't really care about the value or what you're willing to pay. They just want to, in the event you don't pay your bill, they want to be able to foreclose and sell the house and make money. They don't want to lose money. Can you imagine that? So it's not an accurate reflection of the value or the worth of a home. And you need to be able to have this conversation. Now, the less money you have down, the more important that sort of thing was. Devin was off by $150,000. I knew Devin was going to be off. What do? Seller does not have to sell that house to them at the lower appraisal rate, and the buyer does not have to buy the house at that deal. We met with the buyer. Go buy the 2001 version then. You can get it to appraise. If you want to live in a 2001 stucco mansion with curved walls and a bunch of travertine, it's stone and for the backsplash, here's the picture. Would you buy that or not? When I'm selling houses in the Heights, if I'm going to sell 1303 Cortland, and the appraisal comes in and they're using Herkimer and 27th Street and Brooksmith, then I'm going to go and say, you drive over there and tell me if you really think this is comparable. And if you don't really like that house, go buy another one. Because you can't buy this one. You can't buy an A property for the price of B. It just should have worked that way. So on Devon, we made an effort. And we came down $50,000, the buyer paid the extra $100,000. In the high-end market, it's never going to appraise. If you're the most expensive house, I think you just need to tell people. And so when you're representing the seller and there's a buyer, then you need to tell them, there are no comparables for this house. It is not going to appraise. We don't intend to, you're entitled to your appraisal. We can't stop you from getting an appraisal. We're not going to use mortgage appraisal that only protects the mortgage company. We're going to set a standard that says if you want to pay for these things, then you're going to have to pay the difference. And if you know that going into it, then it works fairly well. You can't make them buy the house, and you can't make the seller come down. So you're negotiating again. And it goes back to the buyer. Do you want to buy this house or not? If you don't want to buy it, let me show you. I can sell you an average house all day long, and I can get an appraisal for it just fine. You want something spectacular, the likelihood is that those things, there's no credit in the mortgage appraisal for anything above average. It doesn't matter. And I understand the deal. If you have $2,000 a foot granite versus $50 a foot granite, there's not an inherent value for that for everyone. If I gold plate my bathtub, it doesn't mean that someone's willing to pay for it But if you're selling that, you need to tell the buyer, you're paying above market price for that feature, and you're gonna have to pay the difference for that along the way. When the market is really balanced, it works about fine. When the market's really not balanced, it's very stressful. So, people are fearful today that the economy is going to get worse and that, no one wants to overpay. No one wants to overpay if they think the market's going down. And I tried last week to reiterate, there hasn't been a significant period of time where single-family houses have really declined. They didn't decline in 2001, they didn't decline in 2004, they didn't decline in 2008, and they have not yet truly declined from real value, even in oil falling from $100 to $26 a barrel. Unrealistic expectations coming yet, but the value itself is maintained itself. Yes?
In that situation, because I was asked that question, in that situation, the appraiser used, the property was just about on the freeway. Especially on the corner of the road. And the appraiser used other properties in the appraisal that were across the freeway, across I-45, east of I-45, or south of I-10. Do you feel that those properties are comparable? My kind of comeback was my buyers would not pay the same amount to live on Whitman as they would on Wrightwood. They wouldn't necessarily, although they might consider the Sixth Ward, they probably wouldn't pay the same price to live in the Sixth Ward as they would in the Heights. Is that?
Yeah, the argument is very valid. No, you're not a part. He is required to use geography and math first. So he can't go to the 900 block of Harvard on the feed road if that's further than the one in the Sixth Ward. So he's forced to use this little radius first and then can go over there. And if there's something over there, he's forced to use it the way it
Interestingly
will.
enough, he chose when he wanted to stick within that geographic boundary and when he didn't. Likewise, he did the same thing for the age of the comp. Most of his comps were within 2016, but there were some fairly close that were more recent. And then he went and got a 2014 comp.
Shouldn't be able to use a 2014 comp. You shouldn't be able to use a 2014 comp. I don't think you should use 2015 comp. I mean, that's guidelines, so they must first look for the 3 months and then the 6 months. I mean, they have a checklist. And if you can provide additional comps, that were in the 3 month, the 6 month, and you can. And I provided 2 additional comps to Devin, which we liked. They didn't seem to like them, so they didn't use those 2 comps at all. After they turned in the appraisal, we still had one more chance to resubmit back to the lender to submit to the appraiser additional comps, which were a little bit further, and they chose not to use the more further ones. So in my world, the buyers at Acton Oaks and Oak Estates were about the same, but he didn't really seem to think that argument. They used geography. And one house can ruin an appraisal. You have to prep. I mean, we've struggled a little bit on some of these appraisals lately. I mean, we've had a number of them that have been off. We didn't really have so much of that problem the last year or so, but we definitely are experiencing it. As one person sells in distress, it's impacting all the others. So keeping your sellers involved.
See the basis of the questions I'm getting and into the spectrum, the higher end luxury houses like Devon and the houses that somebody's buying to totally redo.
Right.
Becky had one that had appraisal issue.
But
This one here is another, the property on Wrightwood has the same kind of thing.
Mortgage people want to loan money where people are putting 20% down on what is a normal house, not the value in land or the value in something else, and so the thing with whatever, one of those, it doesn't matter, let's pretend where it is. It's an older complex, the people tore out the walls, they have a 1-bedroom unit, they have only 1-bedroom unit. We're selling it for $700,000. Most of those units that are that same size are 2 bedrooms. Our person just took out the bedroom, okay? Took out a wall for a bedroom. So now it's a 1-bedroom unit in a complex with no 1-bedroom units. The people are putting down $500,000 and we're looking for a $200,000 loan. Couldn't get a loan for $200,000 because there's no loans. Doesn't matter. They're looking for something similar to something else. So when it's not similar, couldn't get a loan for $200,000 on something that had a value of $700,000. I'm just telling you, it's because it was outside the norm. Happens all the time. You would think someone would be willing to loan $200,000 if they foreclose, they pay $10,000 for the wall back out and sell it for $450, right? You would think that's a pretty safe loan. Doesn't matter. It's outside the norm. There's such scrutiny with these guys. They're packaging these loans and they're selling them off to our retirement accounts over here. So they do not want anything odd.
Can you go to the appraiser and just say, ask them to maybe reevaluate based on the fact that maybe they did comps that are in a totally undesirable area compared to the area you're in?
Sure.
Can you go to them and say, hey, can you look a little bit north and east in the area?
Realtors can talk to the appraisers all they want. There was some misinformation about it early on after the reform, whatever. Yes, certainly you have the right to reach out and provide any information that you want. And usually sometimes it's about the other comps that they use. Did you know that this one was next door to a sewage treatment plant or under a power line or had mold or whatever?
Or
You know?
gutted.
Yeah, I mean, some of those things make a difference on adjusting for the comps. Certainly you can reach out to the appraiser and the lender. Lender can't totally throw that appraisal out and go get another one. That's not as easy anymore. You would think that would be the thing to do. But yeah, when I first had 1303 Cortland, the guy called and said, where the hell did you get your comps? I said, please don't even make an appointment for this house. We're not going to use you. Before you even get there, we're going to go back to the lender. You know, and say, you know, and I had 1303 Cortland, we got one appraiser and then we got another. The difference of those 2 appraisals, and that was an unexpected cost, was $200,000. How can you have 2 different guys and the value be off by $200,000? But it's, you know, and oftentimes, when the lender at over $1 million, you have a higher mortgage. If you borrow more than $1 million, you're going to have 2 appraisals in almost every instance. So when you get the 2 appraisals, they're going to use the lower of the 2 appraisals. They're not going to average the 2. You get 1 per million, 1 per million, 1. They're not going to average to $1,050,000. Going to use the lowest appraisal that they have.
Typical bungalow on 14th Street between Studewood and Heights Boulevard. We listed it for $350,000. The appraisal came in at $325,000. They asked for $25,000, and I said, we're not even going to split it with you. I said, it's your mortgage, it's your appraiser. You need to challenge it from your side, and then show me the paperwork where you did the challenge and what their response was. And never called back. And we went to close.
They
So
bought
they
that.
either, they bought the house, or they either.
I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, everyone, the buyer wants the least price. The seller wants the higher price. The buyer will use anything they can to get a lower price. Of course they will, wouldn't you? I mean, you don't want to walk into Neiman Marcus and you pay the same dress. You paid $10,000 for your dress, and I'm going to get the same dress for $8,000. Well, nobody feels good about that. You know, so they're going to use every effort. But yeah, I think if you hold on to it, it's the seller needs to rush. And Devin had rush. If you don't take this guy, it may take me 5, I told him the truth. I'm not sure that I will be able to sell this house at this time of the year. We will probably be sitting here in March. I can probably sell it in March, provided the election's over, and there's stability in the marketplace. But there wasn't going to be another buyer for Devin tomorrow. That's why we gave up the $50,000, which was basically the cost of carrying that house from November 15th to what would have been the end of March. So that's what we were willing to give up. I could have probably sold it for $2.25. I was trying to sell it for $2,479. Just lower the price to $295 and see if I can't get $50,000 more than instead of going down to the appraisal. And just be clear the next time, have the appraisal sitting out. So this is why we didn't lower our price. These comps are not truly comparable. And if you tell the people up front, you know, if Devin had not worked, I think we would have had a better chance of overcoming the appraiser. But of course that buyer said, I don't want to overpay, I'm being relocated, I could be relocated, I don't want to have to take a loss. At the same time, I said, Well, I don't think that you should get all the upside. Why should the builder work for 2 years, build a house and sell it to you at a low value, and you sell it for, in 5 years from now, make $500,000? You willing to put in writing that you'll split the profit with him in the event that you sell it? Never will. And so when we get these appraisals and the people write in the comments, you know, and a lot of the agents are overprotective. I don't think you have to write it in there. It says buyer will lower the price of the house to the appraised value. Seller will lower the price to the appraised value. If you're negotiating and they write that in there, you write right back in there, buyer agrees to pay a higher price in the event that the appraisal comes in higher. Because why should it only work one way? Why should the seller reduce it when in fact the price comes down lower and the seller doesn't have the chance to make more money if it comes in higher? Be realistic. Appraisers aren't making much money these days, guys. They make it up in volume. You can see the numbers, $450 or something for an appraisal. Go ahead and divide that in half. The company made half of it. They're on the same sort of split realtors are, so they probably make 50%. So that guy's making $225. He's got to join the MLS. He's got a Supra. He's an independent contractor. He's got to drive out to the house. He's got to take some photos. Remember, he has the cost of being an appraiser. What's he really making? $100 here? I mean, that's about all he's making, right? Gonna have to do 7 a day in order to make a living over here. He's not making that much money to begin with. So if they're not gonna put forth too much effort, that's why you gotta make it as attractive as possible to these appraisers, because they're not gonna go back and spend another day working on this appraisal, because there's just no financial incentive for them going to do that. You know, but I think, you know, like I say, you can word it both ways where it's right. They receive undue scrutiny if the appraisal matches the sales price. They have another layer of scrutiny. So isn't it to the advantage of the appraiser, who's barely making $100, if you're selling a house for $395, to just make it $397, right? I mean, you don't want to face the same level of scrutiny. So the appraisals are just a range over here. Doesn't mean it's worth $397. It just means it's worth at least $395 to the mortgage guy. The appraisals are only for mortgage people. They're just mortgage appraisals. They're not independent appraisals, not the buyer's appraisal. It's the mortgage guy's appraisal. The mortgage guy doesn't want to go to foreclosure and lose a house.
The same house, Chase Bank was financing it. The appraiser said, I do the appraisal, I send it to Chase's appraisal board.
Right.
And they can either accept it or move it down.
Right. There's rarely a chance to do that. Okay, questions on appraisals. At 417, we're gonna make the same thing, where we had the $1 million two appraisals. At 417, the conforming loan limit, remember, for Texas still. And so if you are buying a $500,000 house and you're gonna put 20% down and you go over there and you finance 420, your life's a hell of a lot more difficult than if you only finance 417. That $3,000 puts you in a higher level of scrutiny. It puts another layer of underwriter. Do everything you can to keep the loan amount, especially if you represent the seller, under the 417 number. Because there's a whole different level of non-conforming loans to conforming loans. So 417 is the threshold, $1 million.
And you have the right to go back and negotiate on that from the sellers. You could go ask, you could say, can the buyer put down
An additional,
another?
that's right, absolutely, you would want to. And, yeah,
Don't change the price, just change the sellers and put it down.
yes,
Remember, TAF is doing
Yeah,
a
Thursday.
appraisal class on Thursday,
Okay.
and he's hosting that with. Yeah, no
Where is
problem.
that?
9 a.m. TAF can tell you.
where is it?
I was actually just gonna print this out edition, title from Washington. I know a lot of guys, it's the same one we did here. A lot of y'all already seen it or talked about or heard of, but we're gonna do another one Thursday.
We'll put out the Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna run through some more questions. Amanda said, how many properties should I send to a buyer who don't want to overload them or whatever? You don't mind, I'm using your name. I'll tell you my first story. My first client was an internet client. They were coming in, she worked at Foley's, they were coming in, and they were coming in for 2 days. We were gonna go see the world. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And literally, the first time I sent them about 110 properties we were going to see in one day. You know, it was 20 in McGregor and 20 in Montrose and 20 in the Heights and 20. Oh, it was just insane. I totally had them thoroughly confused. I truly believe I wouldn't ever want to consider more than 10 houses at a time. I wouldn't send a list. If you can't narrow down, whether it's comps, narrow down, or whether it's actives or something, I would look at a small list and try and group them, no more than that. Even if I'm doing, let's say I was going on a listing appointment for a 1.6 million house, I would pull up the activity. I'd probably start with from March 1, probably that's where I'd be. And I'd see 30 actives, 10 pending, 20 sold. I would go through that list and I would, if I was selling on Euclid, I would take out the ones on Herkimer and 25th Street and 27th Street and Timber Grove. And I would take out the ones that were maybe on Heights Boulevard that were commercial. And I would get down to something that we truly can compare to, both for the actives, because I think that's a more, if you don't buy this one, what are they going to buy? That to me is probably a pretty good indication of where one should list, not what's sold, because that one's gone. Can't get that one again. What is someone willing to pay? And a classic appraisal deal, again, I can take Bob Burleson's house. You got a beautiful house, almost 59 feet wide by 140 something, and then you bought the lot next door, which is 50 by 140 something, okay? It is all day long easier for me to sell that to two different people. Someone's willing to pay $500, $525 for this extra lot. Someone's willing to pay about $1.1 million, $1.2 million for this house. Very few people are willing to pay $1.75 million. And it's harder to get appraisal, but it's just that it's easier to sell to. We will try for a while, but it's still, it's just, they want that extra lot. They don't want to pay what someone else is willing to pay for it. And so that's what you kind of have to keep in mind in the supply and demand deal. What someone's willing to pay for it. Not that it's what something's worth has nothing to do, or what I paid for it. I hear it's like, I have this much in it. I have to sell it because I've been paying interest for 2 years. That has nothing to do with what the next guy's willing to pay for. They are not willing to make you whole because it took you too long to build a house, or your interest rate was higher, or I got it more. Same thing, classic world. I need to sell this for X because what I want to buy costs this. They're not related. Okay, you can't determine the value of this one. It's not determined by what it is that you want to buy. I understand you can't buy this one if you can't sell this one for this price, but it doesn't mean that we're going to sell it for that price. They're not, just because you're using that argument, it's not common sense. About 10. Okay, buyer's rep forms. Pamela had one. She was going to go show in Anahuac. So it brought up the question of buyer's reps. They're really weird.
Really, he's gonna mention your name.
I'm going to mention your name. Put the face to it. If I were newer in real estate and I had a client and I was going to go spend time with them when I could be doing something else, I would bring up the buyer's rep agreement. I would probably tell you this. There's been many instances in my life when I've used a buyer's rep agreement. Because if I felt like the person was going to screw me, do not get in the car with them and don't spend any time with them, okay? If you feel like they're going to find a way to look at houses with you and use their mother to write the contract, don't go down the path with them, right? You gotta it's like dating. Don't date someone you think's gonna rape you, right? That's just probably not a wise investment of your time. Don't go and, so don't do business with people you don't have some fair relationship with. But if I was gonna come in and spend a day, for me, if I was gonna go in and spend a day at the back of the Woodlands, and while I'm in Carlton Woods and Sterling Ridge, I'm missing out on people calling me on a house in Westview and I would send them the buyer's rep agreement and say, look, I'm going to take time out of my day. I want to be your realtor, and I want to make sure that you're on the same page that I do, that I'm investing a fair amount of time for you to go buy a home, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page. You can send it to them. And before I went to Anahuac, I sure as hell would get a buyer's rep, because if they wouldn't sign the buyer's rep, I wouldn't drive to Anahuac with them. So I just wanted to see Anahuac with them. In general, the buyer's rep agreement says that, and it can be modified. We have a standard buyer's rep agreement with the Boulevard Realty that says, we're going to do something, they're going to do something. They're going to use us to represent them on the purchase of a home. You can restrict it, purchase of a home in Anahuac doesn't mean that they end up buying in Wichita Falls. It doesn't mean that they're going to use you. It just means they're going to use you if you buy a house in Anahuac over the next 5 months or 6 months or something of that nature. So you can edit it to kind of say whatever you want. In the event I look at a home that you showed me, I agree that you'll serve as the buyer's rep, but if I find it for sale by owner on my own, I'm gonna represent myself. Don't you wanna know that before you drive the Anna way? It's clear enough. But I wanna be clear, I'm the broker. If someone had this buyer's rep agreement and they felt like you weren't representing them and you didn't do a very good job and they don't wanna pay us, we're not gonna get paid, folks. I am gonna tear up the buyer's rep agreement and tell them I am never, ever going to have anyone pay us a commission when they didn't feel like we earned the commission. It's just not worth it to me. So, and yes, all of us in real estate are gonna get to do a lot of work for some people that we never get paid for. You're gonna get to list a house and spend money on photography and an open house and a lunch and some flyers and an ad. It's never gonna sell, and they're gonna lower the price by $300,000 and sell it with some bitch from Greenwood County. And that's just the nature of the game. If you can't stand that, you guys go take a job with a salary someplace else. That is the nature of the game. You're gonna show plenty of buyers. They're not gonna buy from you. They're gonna buy from another agent. It's a numbers game. And that's just the perspective. We want to be compensated by people that think we have the highest integrity, and knowledge, and experience, and we're gonna be their resource in real estate for the rest of their lives, not that transaction. There's no transaction that's important to me. Relationship is what we're getting paid for. We get compensated to stay in their lives after they buy a house or after they sell a house in order to help them with anything related to real estate. From roofing colors to air conditioning, to paint colors, to gutters, to tax prorations, appealing their property tax values, refinancing their house 5 years later, keeping up with trends, talking to them. I mean, this is what we get paid to do. It's not to find someone a house. We barely find the houses anymore. They find them themselves. It's not to let them in. They can call the other agent and get in. It's not what we're getting paid for. You're getting paid to be the resource that's of value to them during that process, much after the process. I truly believe we're getting paid in advance for money we're going to continue to earn years down the path. If you don't share that philosophy, probably need to go to work for Urban Living or someone who just wants to sell someone a house and hold them to some stupid agreement because they signed an agreement that they rarely understood the first time they signed it to begin with. I don't subscribe to that philosophy.
When I was new, I would use a buyer's rep to build loyalty, but I would never require them to sell. I would say, we have this agreement, but I don't want you to sign it. I think we have a relationship, and that would build the relationship, not signing.
When I would visit with people, whether, and most of mine remember are referrals, I'm not, but let's pretend you met someone at an open house and you sent them a list and then they wanted to go out. You know, before you just drive someone in a car and go show them houses, I think you need to explain what it is that we do, you know. Finding houses is the least of what we do. We try and, when you find one, you're probably gonna see it before I am. I'm gonna tell you about the value trends in that neighborhood. I'm gonna be able to tell you about that location. I might be able to tell you something about that builder, tell you about the school district and crime. I'm gonna help you find a lender that's not gonna take advantage of you. We're gonna shepherd you through the process of negotiations. We're gonna explain to you not only the repairs that might be needed to the house, but the repairs might be needed in the future. We're gonna be able to help you with the cost of those sort of repairs. We're gonna anticipate the cost of future repairs. We're gonna be able to shepherd through the appraisal process, the walkthrough process. I mean, this is what we're gonna do. In exchange for that, I know along the way, you're gonna go look at some other open houses. You're gonna be approached by 30 other real estate professionals during the time that we're dating while we find a house here. And I want to be the realtor resource that you're comfortable telling people that I'm your agent. And so it's not like I know that you're not gonna go to an open house and Greenwood King is going to be there and they're gonna ask you if they can send you a list. I can send you the same list that they're sending. I'm a realist, but I wanna be your professional. You don't have to say anything to the Greenwood King agent. If you want to, great. If you don't, most people will just shut down and leave you alone if you walk into an open house and say, Bill Baldwin's my agent, and I'm just taking a look at this because I saw it's open. That'll shut them down and they won't harass you. If you don't say that, they're gonna harass you for your email address and your phone number, and they're gonna keep calling you, and then you're gonna have 30 people calling you, and you think the robocalls for Trump and Hillary are bad. Wait till you get a desperate real estate agent, they're just as bad.
Right.
So that's what I think you need to tell them early on.
I even had a conversation with someone that thought that you pay everyone a minimal salary.
People don't understand how
Yeah.
they get paid one way or the other. Okay, buyer's rep agreements, did I answer that? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them. We don't really come, it gets confusing. If it's intermediary, we represent the house and one of you guys brings a buyer, then our paperwork requires you to have the paperwork that the buyer understands the buyer's rep agreement. You can write it, Rhonda Power represents Jane Smith in the purchase of 1303 Portland only. It's fine, we're not bounding them, but we have to have that paperwork. The law requires, I have a written agreement for the seller, that's the listing agreement. When they buy our deal, we have the information from other sources, information about brokerage services that explains the broad spectrum of real estate. I need the buyer's rep agreement for that person to understand. They had representation as a buyer, they had a buyer's rep. We only conduct transactions where there is a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. We have no transactions where there's not. We would not conduct business if there were not representation. We do not let buyers represent themselves. We do not let buyers go unrepresented in any scenario. We're not going to do it. We require representation of both parties. We do not let lawyers represent themselves, okay? We've had this conversation many times. They can go and get whatever. They need a real estate professional. I'm assuming that there's 1,000 lawyers in the Greater Heights area, and if they hit somebody while they're drunk, they probably need to hire Tyler Flood. He has a proven track record. It doesn't matter if they're a divorce lawyer or not, they're gonna go over there. If they're getting a divorce, if Tyler Flood gets a divorce, he's probably not gonna represent himself. He's gonna go get a divorce lawyer. Lawyers hire other lawyers to represent themselves. They need a real estate professional to represent them along the way. Okay, I can keep going down this list, but are there particular questions that someone else had before I just keep going down this list? I want to make sure I'm covering any question that's coming up. Option periods. Because of the tightness of the market, sellers are leery of taking their house off for a long period of time. It's better today than it was when it was truly just a seller's market. They could tell you to take 5 days or 7 or dip it. Today, we're probably a little bit longer. So, the seller wants 7 days, the buyer wants 10 days. You see where that yields. If no one else is going to buy it in that 10 days, just give them the 10 days. But I will tell you, and I tell it all my, if you have a 7-day option period, the likelihood is the option period is going to be extended, right?
Yeah.
Let's just make sure that the sellers know. Because if let's say you need a stucco inspection, you have an inspection, they identify moisture in 4 walls or whatever. If you don't extend the option period, they're going to terminate. No one's going to buy the house without figuring out what's in there. And so the next guy's going to do the same exact inspection and notice the same problem. Why don't we just figure out what it is now? And so sellers need to get in. So we can't make them. We are the buyers, and we get the 7-day option period. We get down there to the 7th day, and they don't want to extend, terminate. And I will probably tell you in today's market, they'll just come right on back and reactivate that contract and grant you an extension. There's very few sellers if you need it for recall. No one's going to give you 30 days. They want you to do your due diligence. If you give someone a 2-week option period, then they don't schedule the inspections until the 12th day. Well, we wasted. Why don't we just wait and get under contract in 10 days? Let's see what else happens out there. So be realistic about both sides. No one wants to take their house off the market for a very long period of time for someone who doesn't want it. We want to see that the buyer is not screwing around with this. If they hire an inspector, if they make their appointment, then they're seriously about trying to buy the house. If they find excuses of why they don't want to go spend the money on a $4 or $5 or $6 or $900 inspection, then they probably don't want to buy that house. They're just trying to keep somebody else from buying the house. And there are plenty of those people out there also. They just get them under contract and hope something else comes on the market. They're wasting our time. So 7-day option period, extensions of option periods. Remember, they end at 5 o'clock, and end at 7 o'clock or midnight. They end at 5 o'clock, so it's going to be stressful at 4:50 over here.
That was part of my question. What is the correct way? You're sitting here at 4:30 on that last day, and sellers still haven't got, you represent buyer.
It has
Sellers
happened
still
all the
haven't
time.
come back to you, so you're like, fine, and then fire off a termination, so we're not locked into this, I get that. What's the proper way to get back into contract? Do you have to write a whole new one? Or
No,
just hire
It's
somebody
the
else?
exact same way. The seller's survivors, you can put in an amendment, seller returns their termination that was offered 2 hours ago. Buyer rescinds the termination that was sent at 4:53. That perfectly is legal. You're not gonna send that termination and that amendment to the lender anyway. Nobody really cares and you're back under contract. Happened on 723 Pipes or just that exact same scenario. Couldn't get an answer that they wanted. Of course, they request something at 4:30 and you can answer by 5 o'clock. It's sometimes easiest just to send the termination. But most things, you can't make people buy houses. You can't really make them sell too easily, although it's easier to make them sell. But I mean, these things don't have to be this stressful. I would get, if you're to noon on the 7th day and you haven't worked it out yet, just plan on the 2-day extension. Just go get the extension right then and it's on or before. And if you work it out, you can check the little box that you waived, at 5 o'clock that day. But it's pretty stressful in your life. You're not
Always that
organized.
easy with these sellers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So can't make them extend, so it's back to this stucco inspection, it's back to the hydrostatic test. It's the second round of, they won't let us in to bring in the air conditioner guy to get the estimate. I mean, it's very complicated. There are certainly some people that haven't sold houses a lot, that can be complicated. Oftentimes the brokers have to get involved and say, they must grant us reasonable access to the house. They must grant us the ability, and if they just hell-bent aren't, then you say, look, they're probably hiding something. Do you really want to buy this house or not? And if you're buying just the dirt, you probably buy it. And if you don't, then I would just terminate. If you terminate, I would venture to say that probably come back to you and say, all right, the next guy's going to want the same reasonable access, right? It gets into, the market's, level. What happened was in 13 or 14, you'd be under contract for $595,000, and then all